A tweet went viral last week about the upcoming Airbnb collapse, but is it true? Should you actually be concerned about starting your Airbnb business? We'll give you the answer in today's video.
We are the Real Estate Robinsons.
Hey guys, if this is your first time here, I'm Tony.
I'm Sarah.
And we are real estate investors who quit our day jobs by investing in Airbnbs, and we're here to show you how you can do the same.
So there was a tweet from a couple of weeks ago that went viral and sent people into an uproar. So this tweet came from influencer Nick Gurley, and it has almost 11,000 retweets, 55,000 likes, and over 35 million views.
And in this tweet, Nick makes some pretty bold claims about the Airbnb market. He says there's an Airbnb revenue collapse and that there's going to be a wave of forced selling from Airbnb owners.
So in the tweet, Nick says he pulled all the data from a website called All the Rooms, and he shares that popular Airbnb investing markets like the Smoky Mountains and the Carolinas and Florida, let's say, are all seeing revenues drop by almost 50% across the entire market. 50%!
That's a massive drop, and that means you're going from $80,000 in revenue to $40,000 in revenue. And that's a pretty scary thing to hear if you're thinking about starting an Airbnb business. So we figured we should take some time and really break this down.
But first, who the heck is this guy, Nick Gurley? His Twitter bio says that he's the CEO of Reventure Consulting and Reventure App, the #1 real estate channel on YouTube with over 4 million monthly views. He's got almost 400,000 subscribers on YouTube, and as of late, it seems that most of his content is really focused on the doom and gloom of the real estate industry.
Now, before we keep going, we wanted to share with you guys that we've officially launched our Airbnb coaching program. It's called Alpha Host Academy. And when you join our community, you'll get a mix of one-on-one coaching, group coaching, and on-demand content. And ultimately, our goal is to help you escape the rat race and replace your day job. So if you're interested in booking a totally free 15-minute call with our team to learn more, then head over to therealestaterobinsons.com/alphahost. All right, so let's dive into the actual data that was shared in this tweet. The data came from a website called All the Rooms. Now, I've personally never used All the Rooms, so I don't know the methodology behind how they're collecting the data or the accuracy of the data that they're reporting. And I would say most successful Airbnb investors that we know are using either Price Labs or AirDNA for their kind of market research. Now, after hearing about the article, a spokesperson for Airbnb actually came out and said that they disagreed with the data.
They said the data is not consistent with our own data. As we said during our first quarter earnings, more guests are traveling on Airbnb than ever before, with nights and experiences booked growing 19% in the first quarter of 2023 compared to a year ago.
Now, obviously, Airbnb has an incentive to respond to this because if a potential host sees this, they might get scared away from joining the platform, which ultimately hurts Airbnb.
But we also pulled data ourselves, and it turns out Airbnb has good reason to disagree with this tweet.
We'll show some data we pulled ourselves from AirDNA and Price Labs, but basically our research and our personal experience just don't line up with what's being said in this tweet.
So that's the first issue, right? The second issue with his data was that he was only looking at a snapshot.
So looking at the tweet, there's a little asterisk at the bottom of the tweet that says, quote unquote, calculated as a 3-month average revenue per listing for May 2023 compared to May 2022. There are two things to call out here. First, he's only using a 3-month snapshot. And even though he's comparing year-over-year data, it's still kind of unfair because markets are seasonal. And maybe the 3-month period he chose was down kind of big, but what if there was another 3-month period where you were up really big? You wouldn't be able to tell because he only chose one 3-month period. A better comparison would have been to choose the last 12 months over the previous 12 months. That way you're getting the entire year and not just one small snapshot. The second issue I'm seeing is the metric he chose. He chose revenue per available listing. So what the heck does that mean anyway? Basically, you're taking all of the revenue generated in a city and dividing it by the number of active listings. So for example, say that there are 1,000 listings in a city and the revenue is 65 million. You take that 65 million and divide it by 1,000 and you get a revenue per available listing of $65,000. Now, the downside with this approach is that not every listing is going to be active and available to be booked every night. There are tons of listings in every city that aren't active all 365 days out of the year. It could be because the owner is using the property themselves, or maybe they're allowing friends and family to stay there, or maybe they're blocking it for repairs, or who knows what the reason is. There are countless reasons why a listing may not be active every single night. The point is, revenue per available listing isn't the best metric to use.
The metric that hotels use and what most in the Airbnb industry use is revenue per available room, or RevPAR. And it basically combines the occupancy measurement and revenue measurement to give you one figure that's more accurate about individual property performance. All right, now luckily we actually own properties in one of the markets that were mentioned. In the tweet, it said that the entire market for the Smoky Mountains was down 50%. So let's compare the data from this tweet to our own portfolio.
Our worst property in the Smokies is actually down year over year, but it's down about 30% through the first 5 months. It did $40,000 in revenue in the first 5 months of last year, and it did about $28,000 in revenue through the first 5 months of this year. Again, a drop of 30%, which isn't small, but it's also not 50%.
And it's really important to give some context here. This property specifically had some unique challenges. During the holiday season last year, we discovered mice in the attic of the property. Seriously, like a nightmare during that time. It's a cabin way up in the mountains, so it's not uncommon for pests and rodents to get inside. But like seriously, it was a nightmare trying to resolve and get this issue figured out. But we had several guests complain about not being able to sleep because of the sound of the attic, and some mentioned seeing mice droppings.
Yeah, it's pretty gross, honestly.
Yeah. So we obviously did everything we could to solve this issue, called all kinds of pest control companies, and eventually, thank God, we were able to get it fixed. But naturally, we ended up getting a string of bad reviews.
Second, this property was impacted by some pretty bad weather at the end of last year. The pipes froze during a guest stay, and then we had to cancel a bunch of bookings, issue a bunch of refunds, and block the calendar for a few weeks while we tried to unfreeze these pipes.
During peak season.
Literally, it was during peak season, like the absolute busiest time of the year. Again, not necessarily something that was in our control, but it definitely impacted the listing.
And once we finally unfroze the pipes and reactivated the listing, it just never recovered, really. The rankings have been much lower this year compared to last year. So we're thinking of options to try to revamp the property to get it back to where it was.
But our point here is, this was our worst property in this market. It was infested with mice and didn't have working plumbing during the busiest time of the year, and we're still only down 30%. But now let's look at another one of our Smoky Mountain properties. Through the first 5 months of this year, this property did $45,000 in revenue. Last year, during the same period, during the first 5 months, we made $44,000. So with this property, we're actually up $1,000 year over year.
Which again, doesn't line up with being down 50%, like Nick said.
Even if we took an average between our two properties, we'd still only be down about 15%. And even with this being down 15%, we're still cash flow positive.
We profited $28,000 with these two properties, and we're still on track to get over a 70% cash on cash return. That's 70%.
Now, we still have another 6 months left in this year, so who knows how things will shake out. But our point here is that what this guy tweeted and the data that he showed just simply doesn't line up with what we're seeing in our own portfolio.
But before we keep moving, we'd really appreciate if you guys could give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for notifications. Every new subscriber really does mean a lot to us, and we have a goal of getting to 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. So if you're enjoying the content, if you're learning something, share it with somebody, and be sure to subscribe.
We've also got a totally free download for all of our subscribers. So if you head over to the realestaterobinsons.com/calculator, we've put together a totally free tool that helps you analyze properties that you're considering purchasing as an Airbnb. Here's what we'll leave you guys with. There's lots of talk about the Airbnb collapse or the Airbnb bust. And look, yes, it's true that revenue in some places across the country are coming down, but they're coming down from astronomical highs that weren't sustainable in the first place. And it means that instead of you getting a 200% return on your Airbnb, you might have to settle for a measly 40 or 50%, which is still better than what you can get in so many other types of investing.
But what this new reality means is that first, you have to be super disciplined in your analysis. You need to make sure you're really researching your markets, understanding the trends, and using data to make the right decisions about which properties to buy and which to pass on.
Second, it means you have to treat your Airbnb like a business. You can't buy an old property, throw it up on Airbnb, and hope to make a killing. You need to invest in good design and good amenities, and you need to be committed to being a good host.
As long as you guys follow those steps, you will be fine, we promise.
And before we go, please connect with us on Instagram. I'm at Tony J. Robinson. My lovely wife is at Sarah Rad Robinson. If you're on TikTok, give us a follow there at The Real Estate Robinsons. Again, if you guys like what you heard in this video and you really want to take your Airbnb business to the next level, book a totally free call with our team to learn more about our Airbnb coaching program. You head over to therealestaterobinsons.com/alpha host. And again, it's a free 15-minute call to learn more about how we can help you. That's it for today, guys. I'm Tony.
I'm Sarah.
And we are
The Real Estate Robinsons.